Pkwy. Pkwy is an island. They're their own thing. They're controlled by the federal government. They don't have to, they're good neighbors and they tell us what they're doing, but they don't have to ask us for permission. They go straight to Washington to decide what they're going to do. So if they're building a data center on their land, that's really not anything that we have any control of as the city of Aurora. So.
But doesn't Pkwy use Aurora water and electricity?
Yeah, so
So what?
we do acquire a large water user to Pkwy. It lies a little differently. We have to work with them. We try to coordinate with them a little more closely. Some of their uses are metered through a master meter, a big meter that goes to most of the base. So that's a little more challenging. They do have dedicated meters for some things, like their new data center, where we were able to go share our criteria and hold them to kind of in a cooperative way our criteria. Technically, we could probably enforce if it came to that, but they've been a cooperative partner.
Are there restrictions around the use of gas turbines? We use gas turbines at our data centers.
Certainly not Aurora, but we're going to keep this over to XCEL.
Yeah, we do have gas turbines in our portfolio for XCEL Energy. It's absolutely necessary that we operate electric gas plants to keep reliability. We can't operate a system with just wind and solar. We have to have that 24/7 dispatchable when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. So we do have natural gas on, and we generate that from gas plants. One of the more newest gas plants is one that is out in Rush, Colorado. We actually decommissioned a coal plant a year ago, and we transitioned that coal plant into a natural gas plant, and it came online in January of this year. So it is operating as a natural gas plant. We are not serving directly like a gas turbine right here, and the data center is adjacent to it. The only natural gas that we serve to date to a data center is from the larger grid on the natural gas plants in our state.
So that was my question, and my concern is over like the test XAI, whatever it is, I don't know. The Elon Musk data center in Memphis that is working on how many gas turbines right next to the data center. Is that something just in Colorado is allowed under the law? Something to just go and do, hook up to, apart from, totally separate from XCEL, but they just go and decide this is what we're going to do.
As of today, in state policy, they are not allowed to have what we consider a behind-the-meter generation. So when they're served with electric generation, they have to be on the XCEL Energy side. Now, there has been discussions every once in a while at the state legislature, even just recently, when we were contemplating a couple of the data center policies that contemplated or considered a behind-the-meter model, but that data center, that particular policy never advanced, and then obviously either of the two data center policies advanced and passed. So currently no, but it is a conversation sometimes with data centers on wanting to be served. They believe, some data centers have said that XCEL Energy isn't fast enough. We're not fast enough to build the generation and the transmission to serve such a large customer. We do have to work with them over time because we just don't have a 200 megawatt gas plant just sitting around not being used, and so we have to plan for that infrastructure. And so a lot of really great data centers like QTS has worked with us over several years and built their load up as we build generation and have that available. So there are some data centers that would love to potentially be served not by XCEL because it's faster, but at this time, there are no data centers that are served.
question about the cooling liquid. What is the cooling liquid? How often is it replaced, and how is it stored, sequestered, cleaned?
So the liquid is a mix of water with chemical treatment to inhibit bacteria growth or rust, to keep the pipes clean. Once those systems are filled, that's it. They aren't refilled, meaning that once we've used water, it stays in the system in a closed loop environment. We are not evaporating water. The only time we would have to fill the system is if we had some kind of rupture or something like that. But all in all, we are using very little water on a daily basis. I think the water will agree with that statement. So, yeah, closed loop system, once it's filled and it's properly treated, it is not refilled.
How much water is typically in that solution?
How much percentage of water?
Yes, or whatever you would go to put your answer that question, because we know like there's figures out there for how many gallons a day not included in the cooling system, but how much are we going to put in? It's great, it's not going to go anywhere, but how much is that amount?
Percentage-wise, it's still 99% water. The treatment is, parts per million in terms of the inhibitors that are used, so it's not toxic chemicals. So if it does have to get dumped or for whatever reason, it's we can safely use it and excavate it.
Is it thousands of gallons?
It's thousands of gallons. So in a building such as our single operation building, it would be
We will fill the building to 160,000 gallons for building 1 and 240,000 gallons for building 2 and building 3. Single use, single fill. Aurora Water talked about the daily usage of reusable water that goes down drains. We have that consumption of about 650 gallons a day for building use. That includes every sink, every toilet, the loop is filled. Daily usage is personal.
So, is that your question?
I think so. It puts it more in perspective for people who aren't like as knowledgeable about these activities.
Yeah, so we're a small office building. Once we're done, yes, we use water to fill the system, but we don't keep refilling it. It's a small office building.
How are we able to get like all of them from such a matter of using all of our, I'm so sorry.
Marshall and I are going to be having those conversations.
Okay.
And if anybody has any questions, you can always pull out a card just so we can try and get through as many as we can. How many people are employed by data centers, and then where do you guys get them from?
Well, it depends on the phase of how many we So during the construction phase, we'll have several hundred, 400 to 500 people on the site, and those are almost entirely local contractors. These people don't typically travel around. So speaking specifically to Aurora, 400 to 500 on any given day during the construction phase. Once we're done, QTS is employing anywhere up to roughly 30 people per building. That's just QTS staff. Now you've got our customer staff that are being hired to run the inside the plant data halls for our customers. This is their personal staff. We've got our security staff as well. Now we've got all the contractors that get hired to maintain all our equipment. Those are usually in a small market, not Aurora, obviously. Being for a place like we are, we have a lot of vendors that are big enough to support us and do all the equipment needs that we have. But in a smaller, newer market, people are having to hire people at high school, send them to trade school, train them up, spend all that expense to now service the industry that's growing in that market. Make sense? So it's quite a, it can number in over 1,000 people for a large place. It depends on the market. Not specific to Aurora. Some are electrical contractors, for example, contractors, yes. But that all depends on the state.
Does the process of generating electricity use water?
Some yes, some of the water, so wind and solar, no. Our natural gas plants do use water to cool as we are, because what we do is we use the natural gas to then heat up and create steam, and then the steam is what actually then creates the rotors and then processes it to create the electricity. So we do have water, we use water. XCEL Energy has been in the state of Colorado for over 100 years. And so we actually are one of the largest private entities with the largest amount of water rights in the state of Colorado, just because we've had it for a really long time, because we've been here for a really long time, generating and operating our coal and natural gas plants. We have been slowly selling off our water rights because we're not using them anymore as we've increased with our wind and our solar generation. But when we do operate our current coal plants and our natural gas plants, it does require some water. It's closed loop, just like QTS, so we just move it through. It's non-consumptive water rights, and we just close loop it and cool it and then spit it back out.
So how clean does the water use in a data center have to be? Can data centers use ocean water or non-potable water?
Unfortunately, no, they can't due to the caustic and bacteria that's in there to destroy the pipes in less than half of them have any leaks. No one wants that.
We're trying to be creative. Is there no?
One moment. You don't want to use salt water, they're iron pipes. But effectively, that 160,000 gallons that we talked about, that's a single fill, is tap water. And then it is treated after that point to be neutralized to a passive state where it doesn't create rust, doesn't create bacteria, doesn't create ammonia on the bottom pipes. As long as you don't want those pipes, you don't have to replace the water.
Along those lines of where the water comes from and how you can use it, I'm sure you've heard of the word desalinization. You've heard of that?
Yes, of course.
That possibility that that water could be used and moved across and cooled? Because you guys seem as though water, that I talked about, worst case scenario, water's not infinite. Mother Nature, what you're saying, you're relying on water to drop it down every day for us, but our downstream friends are already arguing and going to court for their share of the water that we have. Have you guys even thought, well, let's set a max on the number of data centers that we implement here in Aurora?
Yep.
Have you thought of that? Have you considered that Denver, Aurora, Pueblo Springs, New Mexico, Arizona need water requirements too? Hoover Dam was just shut down their turbines on April 9th because they didn't have enough water to run the turbines.
Yeah, because data centers going in Arizona are using the volumes we talked about earlier. So there are, yes, we've thought a lot about that. That's why we've created the criteria we have to ensure that water uses here are efficient. So if you'd like, happy to talk to you about what's going on in Arizona, California, Nevada, et cetera, et cetera. We've thought a lot about that. We are reusing every drop of our water that we can. What QTS is doing with their closed loop system is a reuse system, uses no water after the initial fill, and even the initial fill is less than a drop in a bucket. So to put it in context, I heard a question about context earlier. QTS, that data center is using about 500,000 gallons of water per month.
Okay, you just said
golf course,
less than a drop in a bucket.
1
You made it sound
million,
so simple.
1
so
million
easy.
gallons of water a day.
Okay, that's a lot.
So when you talk about what we can do to fix things, we put a lot of thought into that.
Desalinization is good. You can think about that more. You can include that. Okay. Now, well, one more just part. Well, just one final thought.
Afterwards,
One final
do the
thought.
cards first.
Yeah.
If you got a question, put it in a card.
I did. I would.
Well, then it's come up, then if you
Okay,
let us.
one more final
Yes,
point.
No.
Yes. This phone has only 9,000 images on it, but I went and bought a 2 terabyte hard drive external. I store the other 51,000 on that external. I don't need the cloud. If people knew that you don't need a cloud, go buy an external and back it up yourself. You wouldn't need data centers. Every now and then.
Yeah. What investments are data centers making in our
heavily in first responders. We invest in our communities. We do a lot of volunteer work, activities pretty much every month and sometimes every week. We build boxes for our rental house. We donate thousands of dollars to charity literally every month in some cases. So we're in some markets we come in and rebuild 200-year-old churches. There's a community couldn't afford to do themselves. So we're highly invested in our community and our employees. We have a huge veteran population. 80% of my employees are veterans.
I'm going to kind of paraphrase this one, but it's talking about the growth in Aurora and use of water. Obviously, we know that is a concern for all growth, whether it's houses or businesses or whatever. Do we have any plans to limit future, not just gas plans, but future growth because of our lack of water?
Yes, the council, again, very supportive a few years ago. Aurora created what we refer to as the water conservation ordinance. So we've looked at very closely where we're using water, how efficiently we're using water. Aurora built a reuse system. I mentioned earlier, all indoor use, we can recapture and reuse over and over again. Our challenge here is outdoor reuse. It's okay. So I mentioned Kentucky bluegrass drinks about 40% of our water supply every year. The water conservation ordinance went in and said we're going to prohibit non-functional cool season turf. We don't allow Kentucky bluegrass front lawns, medians, curbside landscapes. It has to be water efficient landscaping. Landscaping, if we want to talk about the entire water cycle, vegetation is consuming 80–90% of the water supply across the West through some combination of either agriculture or what we do in municipal spaces. And so Aurora, again, very proactively has created criteria to require water-efficient landscaping, which is where our main challenge is. We've got reuse for the indoor, we're requiring water efficiency on the outdoor, and when I say water efficient, plants that can survive with very little to no supplemental water. And that's what we're requiring in some spaces and encouraging in others. So we allow functional turf right now, and even the functional turf we're now looking at. We're trying to have people adopt varieties that drink 70% less water. So Kentucky bluegrass, 15 acres of water a year per square foot of Kentucky bluegrass. There are varieties of turf that use 70% less water, and that's what we're seeing. If you go throughout Aurora, you'll see sports fields and common areas now that are coming to Home 31 Bermuda grass installed to save water supply. So we're doing a lot very proactively in the growth space, trying to ensure that we can have economic vitality in Aurora while we maintain our sustainable water system. Yeah, that's a great point. The AMC Great Lawn later, I was going to say this month. Here in a couple of weeks, you'll see the Kentucky bluegrass and the Great Lawn removed, and we're going to be putting Home 31 Bermuda grass in there and lowering the water use on the Great Lawn by that 70% I talked about. Those who have that Home 31 this year can actually, we get a lot of people concerned about watering only 2 days a week on the Kentucky bluegrass. If any of us had converted to that Home 31, you'd be happy watering 1 day a week right now, and you're just fine. So it's a very different turf. So yeah, a lot of proactive things in that space.
Marshall, do you want to touch briefly on the grass replacement program that you were talking about?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, we also have very aggressive rebate programs where we're offering to create water efficiencies. The biggest and where we get the most value or the most benefit is what we call our GRIP program, or Grass Replacement Incentive Program. Aurora, again, is pretty progressive in this space. install water-wise landscaping. We're also pretty flexible on what kind of water-wise landscaping people install. So if you want to go full Colorado-friendly plants that don't use any water, your rebate amount goes up. If you wanted to convert to that Oklahoma 31 Bermuda grass that I talked about, you still get a rebate for that. It's just not quite as big of a rebate. The other thing Aurora has done that most communities are not is we've now expanded that rebate program into backyards. And so if people want to go re-landscape backyards and remove the Kentucky bluegrass and go with more water-wise landscaping, we've got rebates for that. So that's by far our biggest rebate program is the RIP program. We also will, and I would encourage anybody who has an older irrigation controller, replace your irrigation controller with a new controller. So if you're 10 years or more old on your irrigation controller, you can go get a new satellite-based system. The new irrigation controllers cost less than $200 per controller now, and we'll give you a rebate of up to $200. So we'll pay you, we'll reimburse 100% of the cost to replace your irrigation controller. And the new ones are very slick. They'll interrupt your programming when weather events come in. They do all of the work for you.
Don't water your lawn in the rain.
Yeah, so you see all the sprinklers going on in the rain, anybody with a new controller does not have that problem. So that's another one that covers pretty much the whole cost of the controller.
Does that rebate include artificial turf?
So the RIP program will not reimburse for artificial turf. That is one of the limitations there. You do have to have natural vegetative material to qualify for the rebate program. So we don't prohibit people from switching out to artificial turf. It has its appropriate place in some areas, but we don't right now rebate for that. Great question.
Okay, thank you.
Can you discuss the process surrounding approval for any future data centers, public input, et cetera? So maybe describe like the notification process, the own sign.
Yeah, so whenever there is a data center, I'm looking for Janine, throw something at me if I get it wrong. If it's in one of those areas that I noted that is an allowed use, that's going to look a little different than if it's a conditional use. So when that application is coming in, all of the submittals for that are available online. They're available publicly for folks to see those. And then a lot of those are going to be in our administrative approval areas. So they're going to be approved administratively as long as it's a permitted use. If we have that, then we do a notification to the surrounding neighborhood associations and adjacent property owners, correct?
And we also have the applicant post the property.
So we do post yellow signs to say, hey, there's a planning submittal, here's the information, you can go look at that. And then if there are registered neighborhood associations or you are a budding property owner, you get notification on that application so that you can see it. And then there's information on how to reach out to the case planner. If you have questions, you can get that information. And then if there's a need to, we can also, if the neighborhood association reaches out, we can have a neighborhood meeting where that applicant can sit down with the neighborhood association, talk to them about what's coming in, what that looks like. And then ultimately, when that is approved administratively, council is notified of that approval. Council does have the ability to call those up if they want, but typically we have those administrative approvals in place because they're in an area that is, again, those industrial areas are intended for industrial development. So that's kind of why we have those there. If it's in that conditional use, then there's going to be a public hearing. It's got to go to the planning commission. You're allowed to show up, have concerns on that, and then it has to go through that process where the planning commission is going to approve that, and then there's going to be a public hearing on that. So that's the process in general. Okay, I'm just giving you the thumbs up, so I got that generally right.
When was the first data center approved in Aurora?
The 90s, you remember?
I think it was 90, it was early 90s. I want to say 92. again, data centers started showing up really issues.
My involvement, you know, is two of the Aurora data centers with circuits. And that's when you saw the larger, the original.
Very small, so at scale, when we're talking small, one of our data centers, one of those early ones, is like a 1.6 megawatt. We're probably referencing sizes, it's like a 1.6 megawatt facility. So very teeny, but it's still categorized as a place.
And then the other would see 4 and 10 glass house.
So I'm going to again paraphrase this question. So talking about closed loop systems for data centers, are there different kinds of closed loop systems? The question was relating because the one in Denver apparently is using 800,000 gallons, but says they're closed loops, or are there different kinds, or?
There's closed loop and then there's hybrid loops, which are a mixture, as Aurora said, that still will evaporate some water. The specific campus here in Aurora is a full closed loop system. We don't evaporate anything. It does, again, the offset is we have to use more power to cool the internal water heaters.
So this question is about the QTS outside district heat. There's actually, whoever asked this question about the district heat area, there's actually an older data center that's been out there, I think, for quite some time, that's a neighbor of QTS, so they weren't the first. But was that area developed before QTS was built, like the heat area, or approved, or like, I guess, how was the reading of that?
Well, our neighbor data center was built, at least 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, obviously development east of Gun Club has probably been going on for the last, I'd say, 20 years. You're out there, you probably know. Yeah, so.
They were there. They were there for 20 years. 20 years. They've been there.
Building with a fence, so I didn't know what it was. Sorry, there's just a lot of, like, you know about water, so I'm trying to make sure I get them all, but don't ask the same one over and over.
I'm going to tap into for you a little bit just because the question had come up previously, and I'll ask QTS and maybe Holly to weigh into this. So in terms of there was a question on monitoring in terms of that. So many times there's discharge to the air in Colorado. That is actually regulated by the state. The city does not regulate air discharges, and so that's done through Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment, CDPHE. So they regulate that. So anybody that's going to be doing any type of air discharge, they go through a state regulatory process on that, and then the state does the monitoring and testing on that. So that question had been answered in terms of the environmental piece of it, so I did want to address that.
Yeah, we have monthly reporting due to the state. We also, every time those gens start, if we have to do it for testing or because of maintenance or power loss, we actually check the opacity of the exhaust to make sure it's meeting standards. We trained our staff in the opacity testing criteria, and we report on that and track every single run, every single hour.
It seems like the data centers and energy storage for renewable energy could be put in the same place or adjacent facilities. Does this work? Like, can we prove everything?
So I'll actually use an example, especially on the battery portion of this. So we have, not only in Colorado, we operate in states. One of our other operating states is Minnesota. And Minnesota is also developing at a much faster pace data centers up in Minnesota. We actually just partnered with Google. They are building a large-scale data center up in Minnesota. It's a 1,000, in total build-out, it'll be 1,900 megawatts. Just to put that in perspective, for the entire state of Colorado, our system in the middle of July at 6 p.m., when everybody's running their air conditioning, is about 7,300 megawatts total. So this is a very, very large data center up in Minnesota. And what we did is we worked with the data center with Google in Minnesota, and they are have committed to wind and solar as their sole generation for their data center. And in addition to that, a 400 megawatt new technology, 100-hour long duration battery storage project. So there's a new technology out there. It's a company called Form Energy. We are actually exploring this battery storage technology. It's 100 hours, so in perspective, current battery storage on any of our solar farms is 4 hours. So we're not really, solving the energy, the energy solution with just battery, but this 100-hour long duration battery storage project company is actually a possible solution. We are developing one of these technologies in Pueblo next to our coal plant, the Comanche coal plant. It's coming online in 2 years, so we're building it out right now. But Google made a decision to invest and pay 100% of the same technology of a 100-hour battery storage project to integrate along with their wind and solar so that they would be 100% renewable. So that's an example of a way in which that could potentially work and something that we can continue to do in partnership with some of the data centers as we develop and generate their power.
Do data centers have to be geographically located close to individual communities? Why not? Why don't they put them in states that have more water, like the Great Lakes?
So it used to be that data centers need to be in metro areas close to fiber connectivity and close to the end users. That's as fiber technology and communication technology has advanced, that's become less of a problem. So now they can push out in more rural areas, more areas that are not adjacent populations. Also, what we've seen is distributed computing. An old design used to be you had a production facility and then you have a backup facility somewhere else. So you have a bunch of servers running in a facility, and if you went to the web page, you were running on those servers, and the backup system only kicked on if the primary system. Now we've gotten to the point of distributed redundancy. So when you go to any page, let's say you go on to United.com and you're buying tickets for the elements of the page that you're seeing on your web page are coming from probably 3 different data centers. Any one of which could go down at any moment, and you wouldn't see an interruption to the page, because the other 2 centers would pick up that load and now continue to serve you the pages. Right? That's advancements in IT technology, so it's less of an issue now being close to metro areas. In the future, in streaming scenarios, however, they still do want to be close to metro facilities, metro populations that are using the streaming.
That's my question. So if it can be located anywhere, why not avoid drought-stricken states? Like, why not just, if literally it's not a technological advantage that we need to be here, why not be where water is so finite, where we're like really struggling to keep every drop?
Yeah, I can only speak to PTS. We are going in multiple states that are conjunctions of land and power, not water, because we're not using them. I can only speak to our, I can't speak for them.
I mean, you're using as much water as 62 households currently. That's a lot of water. Yeah, if you said what, about how many gallons of water? About 500,000? And the average for a household is 8,000 gallons of water per month? So it's about 60 something. According to your number.
Average, sorry.
Aurora residential is 800,000 gallons of water per month.
Average, average residential use is about probably more like 15,000 a month. So it would be not quite 62, but it would be 30 something residential houses. Yeah, keep in mind the footprint of a data center like that is large. How many acres? 65 acres, and so most of so if you actually break down a comparison of single-family residential use from an efficiency perspective, single-family residential per acre uses a lot more water than QTS data center.
Yeah, but we require people, and what we need is rather than people users.
Actually, again, keep in mind that more than half of what's used in single-family residential is for outdoor irrigation. And more than half of what the QTS data center is using is for outdoor irrigation. So it's, again, if you look at the way the water is being used, a data center like a QTS is more efficiently using water for outdoor irrigation. The indoor use component for both homes and QTS is a small, relatively small percentage. And it's for people in those cases, just working people versus living.
The amount of water we use on I think it's a monthly basis, for irrigation is 10 times what we use in
The irrigation supports our wildlife and like the circle of life, our insects and our bugs and everything. How is that comparable to a business using it inside when it's so much greater than our individual use? And it's not just for us, it's for our environment.
Yeah, I think, at least my point I was trying to make is they're both for outdoor irrigation, and the majority of the water footprint for a QTS is for outdoor irrigation. The majority of the water footprint for single-family residential is for outdoor irrigation. So they both are using kind of comparable amounts of water, depending on how you look at the numbers for outdoor irrigation, and then they're using kind of similar amounts of water for indoor uses, bathrooms, toilets, kitchens, things like that.
Marshall, I have to say, outdoor irrigation, you're only using it about 4 months out of the year. 8 months is regular household water use. Shouldn't you guys be using more of a comparison to actual residential use for 8 months instead of just counting it? Oh, it's the Kentucky bluegrass.
So
That's only for 4 months of the year.
It is, and almost 4 months, we're using almost half of our water in 4 months. So you're exactly right. The problem is even worse than what we're talking about. Almost half of our water supply is used over 4 months to irrigate.
Our irrigation systems are off just the same as the residential. We do not run irrigation.
So do you still use the like 800,000 gallons a day on the winter months then?
We do not use 800,000 gallons.
And what's the comparison versus like the summer months versus the winter months? In gallons per day, would you say?
So for, if you're looking at QTS's water use, right, it's about 500,000 gallons a month on average for the year. A majority of that, again, is over the irrigation season, where it's peaking for irrigation use. So in the summer, it's probably, I haven't looked at the bill recently, it's probably 800,000 gallons a month, maybe in the summer, and 200,000 or 300,000 gallons in the winter, even less than that. So again, it's peaking just like all of our local customers, single-family residential, multifamily, all of the customers' water use goes up significantly over the 4 months for outdoor irrigation, and it comes down dramatically in the winter for just the indoor use. So we use, again, for peak day demands in the summer, we're having to deliver up to 110 million gallons a day of water to meet demands. In the summer, that goes down to 35, 40 million gallons a day of demand to sustain all the indoor uses. So yes, you're exactly right. Huge difference between winter water use and summer water use. And it's
So how do you
really-
I have some people that wrote the questions that are waiting for their answers, so I want to make sure I get to them first, and then if we have time, we can open it up. But I want to make sure I'm being respectful of the people that wrote it down and they want their questions answered. If we have a power outage or a power shortage or brownout, will residential users have access, or will residential users be prioritized over data centers? How does that work?
Data center would transfer to generator, and then we run the generator to be on. There are markets that we intentionally go off the grid if we know there's going to be a capacity problem. We've been in close contact with those utility companies during those windows of severe weather. But generally, the grid is quite stable here in Colorado. And again, that's why we have backup generation.
And that is it's a very traditional model for a lot of our larger industrial customers, where they've got backup generation that they can use for an emergency, and they're on a program with the company where if we are capacity constrained in the state of Colorado, we will call them and ask them to move to their backup generation for us to then stabilize the grid. And so there are several large customers that are industrial, like UTS, that do that for us. And that's part of the service that we give to some of these larger customers. It's called an interruptible service.
Are those diesel generators? How many of them?
I'm sorry?
How many do you all have?